Oh, what about you? Okay, in this one, we're going to talk about sockets, but more so speciality sockets. Sockets for taking off rounded bolts. So these are my go-to sockets, and these are the ones that I use. Predominantly these three. These are all 3/8. Well, apart from these quarter ones, but 3/8 drive. They're 1/2 inch drive. They're super lock, and those are wee 1/4 inch ones there. And these are Baco. So nice wee ones there into the side. These ones here, which are used all the time, are Bergen. So cheapo, but none of them's ever broke. And none of them's ever broke because, I don't abuse them. I don't put any serious forces on them. And I have these other types of sockets here. These are sockets for taking off rounded nuts or really, really tight nuts. And so if I'm in a bit of a pickle, then I move over to something like this, what's on the table here. So if you're going to give something a bit of abuse, you need to, maybe consider using the old impacts. This wee set here, you can see pretty beat up. So there's a few sockets in that kit are more or less at the end of their life. And that's a wee Sealy kit, pretty sort of home gamer, sort of average sort of stuff. But I've had that for ages, and that is more or less. There's a lot of sockets in that are sort of on their way out, and I have this as a backup, and none of these have ever been used. This is a laser, as you can see. So just a wee point I was going to put out there. So these boxes have the branding on them there, Sealy and laser. But when you look at the socket, there's no branding on it at all. And we'll go look at the Sealy one here. We'll grab a random one here just. And nothing. So these guys don't make these, so they're just like boxing companies. Now this wee laser kit, there's more in it than there is in that Sealy. So there's more sizes. There's an unusual size there, 20. And it goes up to 32. So I went for that kit because there's just more in it. So this video, it's really about, what works, what I've found that works, and what sort of doesn't work. Now, it depends if you have a rounded fastener, and you've lost, the grips there, the points, and it's more or less rounded off, and it's butchered, and, it's all rusty and stuff. And, you need something that will grip and take a lot of torque. So you see a lot of wee demos on wee things, and they would have this type of socket here, maybe, where there's wee grips in it, so there are wee grips in it, and there's different brands call that different things. Now, though that style has got me out of a hole. It has, when I find a socket that's starting to slip, I would change over onto one of those styles, and it gets it off, and it's just purely because there's those wee extra grips in it. So those wee lines. Now you might recognise those wee lines. We did a video on spanners, and we saw that some of the snap-on open ends had lines in the open end. So we'll just talk about, how the socket actually grips. So if we consider our normal hex bolt here, so we'll have the point there, and then this bit here, this flat side here, is known as the flank. So snap-on in the 1960s sort of gained a reputation because they did a collaboration, apparently with the United States Navy, to sort of redesign their sockets and, think about the way that the sockets grip the bolts a wee bit better. And they come up with what's known as flank drive. And so that is where, it doesn't actually grip on the corners at all. It grips on the flat there. So if we look at this wee drawing here, it says here cheap single drive, hex drive. The load is on the corner only, but and this one, it's on the flank. So you can tell that, if these are elaborated out a wee bit, and we can see that in our sockets. Now, the wee lanes there that we saw here, and on the snap-on sockets, snap-on open ends, we saw the wee lanes there. That's known as flank drive plus in snap-on world, But these terms are sort of, they've sort of became a wee bit generic. And a lot of manufacturers or a lot of brands, would probably use the term flank. They'll talk about this flank here. So Snap-on have sort of coined the phrase of flank drive. This flank drive plus, as far as I know, they're the only ones that really do that on the open enders. And I think a lot of guys say, well, it sort of works, maybe doesn't work, I don't know. And it tends to leave a marring on the fastener as well. So you can see where those wee lines sort of bite in as well. So it can mar it up a wee bit. Snap-on recently, they come up with this, I think it's flank drive extra, where they've sort of just expanded this sort of theory, So cheap single hex drive. Here's a wee cheap Bergen that I use all the time. And if we have a wee look at the profile, we can see the points are actually, recessed. And this bit here is sort of beveled out a wee bit. So nearly everybody, I think, adopts that sort of principle. And there is another version of that sort of design. And this is known, again, this is Bergen. And this is known as Superlock. It may be known by different names from different brandings, but we can see that the point there is recessed in, and the idea then is it's driven by the flank. So the larger the socket, you can sort of see it a wee bit better. So I'll just get you a big socket then. And what's this? This is a Tang 36mm half-inch drive hub rattler, and we can see the witness marks there, where it has actually made contact. So there and there. So I've been doing that forward and reverse, and you can see it's actually catching on these points here, and not on the point at all. So if we get a nut of that size, we can see where it's been impacted upon. It's that sort of 5mm there, 5mm in, and it's not on the point at all. So that is a mate there of that. If I can get it in like that, so we can see where that has actually made contact. So it's all about the contact point, and the flank drive basically means you drive it on the flank. So this type of socket here with the extra grips, there's not many brands do this. I don't know whether a lot of them don't think it's worth the hassle, it's worthwhile, but it's along the same lines as the Snap-on open ender. So there's different brandings. Now this one here is the cheap Bergen make there, and they call it XION. You can just maybe about see that there. Can you? Not really. Doesn't matter. Sealy call them lock-on sockets, and the company Wurzburg, I think I'm pronouncing that right. They call them Loctite, with lock spelt LOK. So you can check them out if you want. Now, I have had the situation where I had an ordinary Hex on it, and I could feel it. It was starting to raid over, and I swapped it onto that, and that took it off. So there's two things at play here. It's grip and the amount of torque that that'll take. So it's how rounded it is. If it's overly rounded, that's not going to do it. And clearly, if the fastener is getting to be rounded, there's it's going to be tight. So there's a fair amount of torque required. So that this will assist where this one isn't doing the job. But if you get something that's really, really rounded and it's really, really tight, then you need to up the game and try something else. So before we look at our speciality twist tape sockets and stuff like that, we'll have our traditional Hex, our 12 point, for a Hex here. This is a Hex 6 sides, and that's 12 points. Now, these still have their place. Just got a bolt that fits out. These still have their place, but as you can see, it's grabbing the point there, so it's not grabbing the flank at all. So this idea here is sort of out the window with these. Now, these have their place, okay, still. I don't use these an awful lot. These are the go-to ones. These are the ones that are in the drawer in my tool cabinet. But the idea of these here is, if you're in a tight spot and you haven't got a bit of a swing, you can just turn that around a very slight bit, and that turns your drive a very slight bit, turns your drive a very slight bit. So as long as the nut's in good condition and stuff, that'll do the job, But if the nut's in bad condition, this will, it's not touching much of the flank at all there. Now, this particular one here is a bit marred up. It's an old one, and that is our favourite brand there, Draper Expert, which, okay. Take it out what you want. So, okay, we'll go on to a completely unused Godora here. 17, and very confusing, it says D19 on it, but Germany, 17 millimeters, a wee bit of a knurl. There's a couple of subtle differences here. There isn't as much as a chamfer on the end here, so you've more of a purchase on this side, on this length here, or depth, if you want to call it that. So you want that to be flat-sided, and it is actually it appears to be gripping it a wee bit more, and that is a snugger fit. Now, that is pretty much unused. The reason why that's unused is I don't use these Hex sockets an awful lot. These here are, sort of sacrificial. These have got beat on. That's maybe got hammered on to a nut or something, and that's why it's sort of marred up pretty badly. But under normal sort of operation, I don't use these 12 points at all. And you can get the 12 point again. There's our cheapo make there, Bergen. Pretty new looking. I've had that set for a brave while, but again, don't really use these too much. This, the reason why I have that set is it goes up to 32mm, I think it is. So there's a lot of hub nuts that aren't Hex, are 12 point, and I would use them on that. So if I have a wee look, yeah, it grips it quite well, and it's pretty deep as well. So all shapes, sizes, lengths, and all that there. So it's all about using, what's appropriate, the appropriate socket for the appropriate application. And that's, you don't end up marring stuff up, breaking stuff and all that, because you're doing something that it's not really designed to do. Right, I'll bring it back over here. Now, this is my, now this does sit in the tool drawer. So this is the super lock ones that I was telling you about. So you may notice that one there basically hasn't been used. So whenever I come across, it's usually the smaller sizes are giving you the problems, the 10 mils and stuff like that. So if you look at these 10 mils, I'll just put that down. So if you look at that 10 mil, that 10 mil is basically worn done, nearly. You know, so that has, you know, that's done. That's got fasteners on for me that an ordinary hex tape didn't do. Let me see. I've had to actually go onto that wee quarter drive then, I think, for some, and you can see it starting to get marred up inside it a bit, you know. But yeah, those there definitely do work, but it depends on the severity. So, you know, we're into these other sort of things here, you know. Well, before we go into that, we'll go back on to our impact hacks there. So these two boxes that you saw there that I showed you earlier on there, but I have other impact sockets which are more of a brand name, you know. So that's Halford's Advanced there, and if we look at that, we can see, you know, the flank drive type of idea going on there with that impact there. So if I put that in, it's catching on the flanks there more so. So you can see the points are elongated there, so it's not catching on the points. And this one here then, this Abaco there, and again it's 17 mil. The difference here, you can clearly see it's damn sight beefier, still 1/2 inch drive, but look at the size of it, you know. So there's a lot more meat around here to take a good old rattling. So again, we put it in, that's a really snug fit there on that Baco impact. So there's different stuff for different purposes, you know. It's these wee kits here that you see. A lot of guys know, well, I call them twist sockets, and it's because there's a spiral in it. So you can see there, it sort of spirals down. So these only go reverse. These only will take a normal threaded nut off counterclockwise. So it only works in the one direction. And that one there, the funny thing about these type of Swiss sockets is they don't actually put a size on it. As you may have noticed, I've tip-axed the sizes on them there. So it comes out as you know, a number 6 and a number 8 and all that there. That number 6 there is a 14 mil that I've decided to pick up. Isn't that right? That's a 14 mil, and it doesn't fit into that. In fact, that's a number 9. I should say. Right, so it's a number 9, and that is a 17 mil. So that is for that 17 mil headed bolt there. And as we can see, it doesn't actually go into it. So that is expecting your bolt head to be smaller, to be rounded, and then whenever you're putting your force on it, it is actually drawing it in. You know, so you want to put your turning force on it and sort of force that way as well, and that sort of sucks it in. Now, see these? I've found these to be the best job for taking off rounded nuts. That they work. And another wee thing I'm going to point out is you can get at it from the outside, and it's also a 3/8 drive there. So see this idea here of the a hex on the outside of the socket. I don't know why are not all sockets made like that. So you can get at it from the outside as well as the inside. You can drive it from the outside as well as the inside. I have went out and pursued and looked for sockets, ordinary sockets that have an external drive on them, and I have come up with some, and I'll show you them later on. So I like them so much that, however, they're a bit bulky. So there's these wee kits here you can get, and it's the same job, only they're a lot smaller. You know, they're not as bulky. So what size is that? Doesn't even say a size on it. So you have to. There's number 7. So that one we had out was a number 9, wasn't it? For the 17 mil. And we'll get a wee chart here number 9, 17mm, and the outer hack size is 25mm. So yeah, and the same sort of crack. It doesn't go into it, because it's expecting it to be rounded off. So there's another type of these, and there's certain brands and manufacturers sell them, and it's that. Now, I have not had as much success with this type here as that type. So that's my experience anyway. So I'll show you these. Let me see now. So what we get? We'll get the 17 again. All right. And we'll have a look at these ones here. So they don't have the twist. It's a straight cut inside it. So there's manufacturers, and they call these flank bait sockets. So instead of flank drive, flank bait. And the idea is that it baits into the flank. And as you can see, the 17 goes into that, right away. A good headed 17, though a non-rounded 17 does indeed go into that. And the idea is that it baits on the flank, sort of halfway down the flank there. So if you are going anti-clockwise, it's baiting into that point there. That's the idea of it. So flank bait. So there you can see it baiting into that flank. But definitely not as good as those. I can assure you of that. So you might notice this other wee kit here sitting on the table, and this is a very cheap. This was less than a tenner. This, and I have not used these at all. Laser, 7524. No links, no recommendations. Get what you experiment yourself. And I've bought all these different things to see what's best and all that. And I'm handing you this information that has cost me a fortune to try and feel and all that. So there's a 17 here, and we're going to focus into it. Are we? No, we're not. Hold on. Right, I've got you now. So laser 17mm, and this again is this flank bite idea, but there's not an awful lot of meat here, and you put your normal sort of ring spanner on it there, and that's the idea there. It goes in like that, and it bites onto the flank with those sort of wee teeth there, and quite small wee teeth at that. So to be honest with you, just by the looks of that, I haven't actually tried that. Whenever I got them, I just looked at them and I said, they look like a sort of, they're not as grippy as these ones, and these ones here I haven't had miraculous success. It's taken a couple of things off maybe, but those ones down there, they work. These ones here, again, it depends on how bad it is, So that's a similar version of that. That's a very sort of thin-walled, and you can see that this is obviously a lot thicker. Now, the only thing about this is that might get onto somewhere that won't, And the other thing about this one is there's no hexagon on the bottom of it. You purely have to drive it with a ratchet. So remember, I talked about your pivot point. So in this one here, your pivot point, you're actually on the nut head. So there's maybe an advantage with this sort of idea here over that, But definitely prefer this one. You can get you're on the nut with this design as well, because the spanner is going to go onto that externally there. So that is sort of similar to that, only I can take that sort of draws the head in, or that pulls in onto it as it twists. And the more you twist and the more you pull it, the more it's gripping, where you're just relying on the rotation on this. You're just relying on that gripping, you know. But there's another force at play with this one here. So here's another type of socket that I haven't talked about yet, and it's this one here, grip lock, they call that. And there's a lot of brands, go for this. Now, I'm not a massive fan on it. It allegedly claims that it may help with rounded fasteners, but it's not really its forte. It's not really what it's designed to do. It may do. You can see that it's gripping where it's gripping there. So instead of your flank drive where it's on there, it's on 6 sides. The idea is that you're going back to the 12 point again, but the 12 points aren't on the points. They're more on the flank. So that's the sort of idea of it. Now, this is a Baco one. So there are sort of decent manufacturers that are doing this, but this is in a kit, and I'm going to show you this whole kit because I liked it, and the reason why I bought it was it's quite diverse. So here's that kit, that Baco kit that I talked about, and you don't really see it advertised that much. And that's the S530T on it there, and there's nothing in the lid of it. But so it has these gear lock sockets, and we'll just get one out. So different brands do this gear lock idea, and the idea is that it can be sort of diverse in its application. So there's a Torx head, for example, and that fits onto that. It is a bit wobbly, but that will get that off, So it does grip on the different sort of sizes. If you have maybe an oddment size or a Whitworth size or an Imperial size, it is worth a go. Now, we'll just put that down there. This external drive, as you can see, there's no internal drive there at all. So it's the external drive of this socket is what attracted me to it. And to be quite honest with you, I think why aren't all sockets? You can drive it internally and externally. So I thought that was a real advantage because you can get at this. You can put an open ender on that, like so, and you can drive it from above or below, so you don't have to go on the end of it. So if you're tight for space and you're down an engine bay, this is to me is a real advantage. And this one here is a go through socket set or a pass through socket set. So for strut mounts, for example, so you get that onto there, and she is right through, and that's a wee extension. But that's the idea of that. So it is driven purely externally. There are other go through sets about, but it hasn't got they won't have an external drive in a hex formation. It's like a ribbed sort of idea, and you have to use the ratchet that they supply with you. But in this one here, I can get that was a 19mm there on the end of that, So I can drive it with whatever I want, or I can put a socket on it and whatever. Anyway, the other bits and pieces that are in this kit, it sort of diversifies it out again, because so you have this bit, and that converts that into an absolutely flat socket. So there's no protruding parts on it at all. So that's the idea of that. If I can get this out now, so it is held in with the wee ring there. The other thing is these wee adapters. I have used these. These have come in handy. So if you do have a socket on your bolt head, and you put the drive into that, then you can get an open ender onto the end of that, and you can drive it from above again. So if you do have the room to go out the way, you can drive it from above. You don't have to drive it from in there. And then, the predominant idea of that is it just converts that onto an ordinary ratchet, and with your release ball there. And then again, we'll have Torx. So we can convert that to Torx if we want to. But what that also then does is basically converts a Torx into a hex. So you can put that onto a Torx head and just put an ordinary spanner on it, and you put a longer, a longer driven spanner onto it. So there we go. And there's what's this here? Oh yeah, there's a similar wee adapter, and that's for your wee quarter drives there. And there's a wee magnet on it. So again, you can get something externally onto that. So I quite like this idea of having external drives available to you on sockets. So you can put whatever size a wrench or spanner that you have onto it. A wee trick you can do. So here's a small Torx size. So that's a small Torx size there, and you can get a spanner onto the end of that. What size is that? That's quite small. So we want to put a big long spanner onto it, and we can convert that with this wee adapter. Put that onto there, and we can put then the bigger size spanner onto it. So that's sort of built up to accept a larger spanner. So you can put a longer spanner onto it, and that'll assist with getting it off. I think if you put a big long spanner onto something that size, you'll probably ring it. But that's an additional option with all these wee adapters, and it's all in that one kit. So I'll just show you this bit. We haven't finished with the rounded bolt carry on just yet. We're going back to that. There's more to talk about. So these are shallow sockets, but they have this external drive on it. So when you put that on, and then you can get at it from above or below. You don't have to go on to the end of it, but you can in this case if you want. And that's a 1/2 inch drive, and that is a 3/8. And you can see where I've been at that. So I have a range of sockets for that eventuality. So that means then that you don't have the bulk of the head of the ratchet at all. So a ratchet, if you put a ratchet on that, even a thin-headed one, it's going to come out to about there. So if you're in a real tight spot, if you're wanting to go down the side of an engine or something like that, you can put something on directly above it, and brilliant advantage that. So I was looking for that in a quarter drive as well, and there's a couple of kits. Vera do a kit, Facom do a kit. They're quite expensive. This is a cheaper version of that on the laser. 6717. Again, no links. Do your own. Google it. Just Google that. And whoever you buy it off, it's up to you. And whatever you pay for it. That was about £30. And we have these wee boys here. So to me, manufacturers should promote that bit of diversity rather than anything. And you get a wee ratchet in it, if I can pull that out. But I don't really care about that, because it's 11mm, and it clicks on, and there's a wee ring in it to hold it. So you end up with a normal type driver. But what I want to do with that is let's get an 11mm spanner. We'll get an 11mm spanner, and we can go on to. Hold on, that's not 11mm. That's 13mm. What am I doing? Place is getting wrecked. There's tools everywhere when I do these, right? So there's your 11mm on an open ender, and if you're tight space, you can flicker around and stuff, and there's your depth you have. So if you imagine that the head of the nut is what's that, 10? So if a wee nut here. So imagine a head of a nut going into that, and you're just backed off that wee bit off it. If you can't get it directly onto that head of the nut, if you any socket, if you put a ratchet onto it, you're going to be out to there. So here would be what would be a normal type 1/4 inch drive, 10mm. And we'll go on to that, and that is a fairly skinny ratchet, the head wise there, We'll put that onto that, and look where we're out to. We're out to here with it. Whereas my other configuration was here, and what did I do with 11mm? And I'm onto there like that. So I was way out here initially, and then there. So if you're doing engine work and you're in tight spaces and all that, these wee bunnies here with the external head, I'm telling you, they really save your bacon sometimes. Well, of course, I know people are going to say, look, you just get a normal hex and, you bait it onto your rounded nut. And yeah, that works too sometimes. What I would advise, if you are going to go down that route and, you have sacrificial spanner sockets or whatever, or you can, you maybe have a socket and you can weld it onto the nut, perhaps. What I advise is, either use a blue wrench or a heat inductor, and you heat that up. It's flipping cherry red, and that will soften that a bit, and that will bite in. So what you're trying to do there is, you're using the teeth to make your own sort of flutes, make your own grips on that, and that's what you're sort of trying to do there. Sometimes that works, sometimes dead on, but I'll show you a couple of other things, and some are good, some are not so good. Right, I'll bring you over here, and there's been a kit there sitting there all this time, and I'll show you this idea. Now there's no grip in it at all, so just get a wee torch here to show you it. There's no grips in that whatsoever, and again, it's from this company, US Pro. So there's different brands do this, and they've stamped their name on it. And the idea of that is you put this baiting stick into there like that, and you hammer that on. So it's a wee bit like that idea there where you hammer the socket on. So this, you hammer it on. Now the trick up its sleeve with this is, and I'll just get a gauge to show you. Right, so what size is that supposed to be? 18mm, it says there. And if we put this bio here on it, there, start off, well, it's not even 18mm, it's 17.3. So it's smaller than the thing. So it's expecting the nut to be damaged around it, material lost. And if we slide it up in, that goes down to 16. So that's sort of like a cone shaped inside that. So that size depletes the further in you go. So that's the idea of that. Right, well, I don't really recommend that kit. That's a honest truth. I've tried it a couple of times and it didn't work. And I did something else and it works first time. And I'll show you what does work. So here's that box. Here's a bit of a bump here. And I thought this was interesting. Please note, in some cases, it may be necessary to grind the socket to reduce the length or thickness for a crack fit. These sockets are classified as consumables and may be replaced after you do not use crack. So, center the socket on and hit with a 1 kilogram hammer until the socket is firmly on the nut. Blah, blah, blah. Doing it using imprint rigs. So that's, well, it seems like, it's along the ideas of that. Well, you're basically hammering it on, and then it goes down to cone shape. But, there's no grips in that whatsoever. And, well, I didn't really have much success with it. I think I used, this one, is it? Maybe, that one. We can see inside that. And this is the result. If I can get a bit of light in it for you. So the problem is that the most nuts you can only go in so far with it, and you're trying to you're trying to sort of reduce the diameter by baiting that on of the whole circumference of the nut, and that's not really that easy to do. Now, the very fact that you're hammering that on, this is another thing, and the very fact that you're hammering something on, that can actually help in freeing the nut itself. So what you're doing is you're stressing the threads. So if you have a nut in and you're impacting it with a hammer or whatever, and you're pushing it like that, and you're shaking it about. So that is actually a known good method for, despite the fact that there's rounded nuts, if the thing is rusted up, seized up, tight as a drum, you can give that a few taps on it there. And there's other sockets that have wee designs in them that follow that idea. So, if you don't want you have to, if you're going to bait on that, you have to watch that, you're not going to mar it up, cause more damage, round it up even further. Or you maybe don't want to shock the thing. Maybe that's a bolt in a gearbox or something, and you don't want to bait the crap out of the gearbox. But anyway, I'll show you that as well. So that's bringing on the another kit, and it's this company Welch Worksburg, or I don't know how you pronounce that. All right, so here is a thing, and I'll just drop you down a bit. There we go. Right. So this here goes on to an impact driver, and then that's a square set on that, and they give you this thing here. Now see, when you're rattling that is bouncing about all over the place, and you need to put like a roll pin on it. But anyway, that's okay. That's dead on. The secret of what they're trying to do here is in the socket. So if you look at this socket, it's not very deep. Okay. So anyway, right. Okay. So if we get this wee nut here, there's like a washer on that. So if you put an ordinary socket onto that, you will get a bit of force that way. So you will get a bit of force that way. But you can see that's not even touching the wee washer. But if you have an ordinary bolt, that doesn't have a washer on it doesn't have a captured washer, it goes on and it rests on the head of the bolt. And as you can see, it's just shy of what it would be fastened onto. And the idea is you hammer that, and with this here, then you turn it at the same time, and you can rattle it about like that. Now, if you haven't got these special sockets, you could come up with a method yourself here. So what you could maybe do to mimic that is you get an ordinary socket, and you load it up with nuts, and whether you get the right depth or not, you might have to put a few washers in it or something as well, and that backs it up, so you have that same effect, and you can get on that. Now if you don't want to wreck your socket, then you grab an ordinary impact driver, take that bit off, and you've got a 1/2 inch drive. So you put that on there. Well, you want to put an impact one on, put a few nuts in it, and that'll bring your, if I can pick the right thing up, that'll bring your up to there if you load that up with nuts, and you can get a few hammers on that. And the only thing is you can't sort of turn it. There are wee adapters you can get that are like that. They're for an air impact gun, but you can just hammer on that and get that same effect that these things here are doing. Now these work quite well. That idea is pretty good. But putting it onto an impact gun, it is quite violent. And if the fastener that you have is onto just a bit of sheet steel, if there's any movement in that, then all that's a waste of time. So the last one I'm going to show you is the I think what they call a twist socket. So again, different brands might call these different things, So these are an anti-clockwise sort of spiral cut in there, and if we look, they have weird sizes. So if I can get you into focus, there's 21.5 mil, and what's that one there? Well, it's just 17, and there's 18.5. Now these are they're produced designed for wheel nuts. So they're quite big. As I say, my wee super lock kit is predominantly used on the smaller sizes. So it's the bigger sizes not really used because, a half decent ordinary socket gets them. But if you have a wheel nut that is, you're beating a socket on it and all that, none of that works. And this didn't work. This one here got it. So these do work, I can tell you that. I'll just show you. There's a couple of wheel nuts, believe it or not. And the only way I could get that back off again was to weld that to that, because I couldn't get a grip in the vise on it, because it's that cone sort of shape there. So I had to weld that on a bit of bar. And that's the style of locker in it. It's just all wee teeth in it, and all the wee teeth were all rounded. So they've been put on with an impact or whatever. It's a stud type hub there. So whenever you screw that on anti-clockwise, and again they only work in the taking off direction. So you screw that on, it cuts the thread on that. So that thread wasn't there, That would normally have a wee spinny thing on it. So you need to chisel that off, and then you end up with this round exterior, and that then appropriate size cuts a thread into it there, and whenever it hits the back, it can't go any further, then she just locks up, and there's only one way to go, and that is off. And that's what I had to do to get that off. They were really, really tight, they were put on far too tight, and as a result, then whenever you try to take them off, all them wee teeth just marred up, and you couldn't drill it because the inside of that is the stud. So the inside of that's the stud, So you can't drill a hole in the guy's stud. So these worked, but for me, I would love it if you get this style. Only it was they were smaller, and they would go right down to like 10 mil. But they do work for design for wheel nuts. So there we go. Right, okay, guys, that's it. I think I've waffled on enough. We might do another one and make us a wee mini series, and we'll talk about extensions and maybe a wee bit more in sockets, and how to give you as much diversity whenever you're working in tight spaces and engine bays and stuff like that. But for now, just stay on me. Thanks for watching. All the best, and bye bye.